Welcome everyone to a little bit of light, awaiting Moshiach. Shavuos is coming next week. We'll be reading the book of Sefer Ruth. That's the Hebrew for the book of Ruth. And as we know from the end of the book of Ruth, that Ruth, or Ruth, that's the Hebrew name that I will be using, Ruth was the matriarch of David HaMelech, of King David, which makes her the matriarch of Moshiach. I'm going to share with you a very beautiful explanation that I saw. What was it that Ruth did to merit to be the matriarch of Moshiach? And this comes from Rabbi Moshiach of blessed memory, where he is citing and working off a sefer, a commentary on the book of Ruth from the commentary called Nachlas Yosef. And he begins by giving a very important overview of what was going on at that period of time. It's really what was happening before the book of Ruth began. Now, there is a question as to why, what is the lesson of the book of Ruth? What is it meant to teach us? And one explanation given in the Medrash is, it's to teach us the reward of people who do kindness. And Rabbi Greilach explains this in the following way. The book of Ruth begins with a man named Elimelech leaving the land of Israel for Moab. Elimelech has a wife, Naomi, two sons, Malchon and Chilion. All the men die in Moab, and Malchon and Chilion, actually, Elimelech dies. Malchon and Chilion marry two Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. They both die. And then the book of Ruth describes how Naomi went back to Israel. Her two daughters-in-law followed her. Orpah eventually left and went back to her family. Ruth stayed with her in Eretz Yisrael. And the book of Ruth depicts how Naomi came with her mother-in-law, was so dedicated to her mother-in-law, how she went out to the fields to glean amongst the poor, to be able to support her mother-in-law, where she meets Boaz, who was the relative of Elimelech, and eventually the whole story of how Boaz eventually marries her, and King David is a great grandson of hers. Now, when Elimelech leaves to Moab, the Medrash tells us that actually this was a very grave sin on his part. We know there was a famine then. Elimelech was the leader and the greatest of his generation. Instead of staying with the people, he left the people. The pressure of people coming to him to ask for monetary help, for support, was too much for him, and he left. But he actually left his leadership position. People were relying on him, hoping that he could lead them through this difficult situation. And he kind of gave up on the situation, and he left and was punished for that. And Rabbi Greilach points out that this is all based on Midrashim, that Elimelech's self-centeredness was not just something that was his problem. It was really symptomatic of society as a whole, leading up to that time. The Medrash teaches us that when Yoshua, the disciple of Moshe, the leader of the Jewish people who conquered the land of Canaan and divided up the land of Eretz Yisrael for the Jewish people, our sages say that when he died, there really wasn't much eulogizing for him. And that was because people were very busy. You know, they had settled in the land of Israel. They were working the land. People were very, very busy gathering their grapes and making wine. They were very busy, gathering grain and threshing it. And because of that, instead of eulogizing and focusing on the death of Yeshua, and the gratitude that they should have shown to Yeshua, they remained very busy with themselves. When a person is self-centered, you're not going to have a person who is self-centered doesn't have a place in their heart to express their gratitude to someone who gave them everything. They're too focused on themselves. That was the situation already earlier in the times of the Jewish people. Later on, we also find that the story of Ruth and Boaz takes place during the period of the Shoftim, of the judges, right? We have In Tanakh, we have the book of Yehoshua, the book of Joshua, then Sefer Shoftim, the book of Judges. And it's during the period of the judges that this whole episode takes place. As a matter of fact, Boaz was a judge. Now, there is a very disturbing verse in the book of Shoftim, Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17, verse 6, Pasuk Vav, verse 6. By Yomim Ha'im, in those days, in Melech b'Yisrael, there was no king amongst the Jewish people. Ish hayashar be'einav yaseh. Everyone did what was right in his eyes. It means everybody was just doing what they wanted. What they wanted was upright, and that's what they did. And in essence, that did not help the Jewish people at all. This self-centeredness that already had begun with Yehoshua was eroding society. Society eroded further in the times of the judges, as the Torah mentions, and actually led to some very, very difficult sins amongst the Jewish people. Pesel Micha, the idol of Micha, the almost obliteration of the tribe of Benjamin. Very, very tragic and situations of anarchy amongst the Jewish people. All because of the fact that they were so self-centered, only focusing on themselves. When you're only focused on yourselves, then when you're only focused on oneself, then society falls apart. And that's what was happening to the Jewish people. So the Matriarch says, what did Hashem say? Hashem said, to destroy them, I cannot. To return them to Egypt is impossible. To exchange them for another people, I cannot. What then shall I do with them? I shall chasten and purify them through hunger. Hunger meant that their focus on acquiring wealth, their focus on themselves would fall apart. There's a hunger. They have nothing. They're broken. That would have been the time to get the Jewish people refocused on where they need to be. That is what Elimelech was meant to do. But unfortunately, that self-centeredness that had preoccupied the Jewish people took its toll on him. Again, we're talking about a very great man, but at some level it took its toll on him, which is why he left the Jewish people and abandoned them. Okay, now Ruth comes on the scene. This convert, she's a foreigner, and she sets an example for the Jewish people that really shook them to the core. Here is again, she's a convert, she's a stranger, and she goes ahead and she leaves everything to support and help her mother-in-law, Naomi. She is completely dedicated. There's nothing about this for herself. She's completely dedicated to her mother-in-law. Let me read to you how Rav Gailak brings, this is an English translation from this work, Nachlas Yosef. She, the young princess, followed an old forlorn woman to a foreign land to share her fate and support her by quietly listening. That was chesed, which Hashem said through the mouth of the prophet, for these I have desired. This is what the Navi who wrote this book, the book of Ruth, is teaching us. In order to save a nation from sinking, in order to give its life a new pathway, there is no need for earth-shattering actions, but small acts between man and his fellow. This is the path to real change. For the world's future is built upon bringing people close and on relations of kindness between them. And no other foundation has the power to repair and elevate humanity as does chesed, as does kindness. Here she was. Everybody saw what she was doing. Boaz noticed it. Boaz married her because of it. And this now showed people how we should be acting. There have been people throughout history that have done tremendous things on behalf of the Jewish people, started movements that have changed the history of the Jewish people. Ruth did that in a very quiet, simple way. It was through kindness. It was through chesed. It was through selfless dedication to someone else. That set the sample for the Jewish people, and that brought the Jewish people back to where they should be. That was the accomplishment of Ruth. And why did she therefore merit to become the matriarch of the Jewish people, of Moshiach? And the answer is because just as she, with her actions, brought everyone together, which brought society to where it needed to be, that is what Moshiach is going to do. Moshiach is going to be the one to break down the barriers between people and bring them all together. And for that, I like to go back to the words of Rambam Maimonides in the 12th or the 13th principles of faith that we have been discussing. And I mentioned this before, but it really becomes very, very well understood now, even more. The Rambam writes that one of the things that we believe, that we're to believe about Mashiach is Ulahamin sheyu by atzma v'ava, to believe that he will possess strength and love, udrisha a love, and he will be sought after. The world to come to perfection needs the right leader. That leader that's going to have strength and love. Love. He is going to bring everybody together with strength and love and the strength of personality, who he is. But there's going to be an aspect of bringing the world together. What does it mean? And people he'll be sought after. That's the point. Mashiach as the leader will be sought after by the people of the world, and that will bring the world together. And one of the attributes that he's going to have is love. He's going to want to bring humanity to where it needs to be. And that comes from his matriarch, Ruth. Through her kindness, she brought the Jewish people together. And she merited for that to have a descendant that will bring the whole world together. You know, when we've been discussing the past, how Mashiach is going to bring the world together. So I always thought as the idea of, well, Mashiach is going to be the one, Hashem will be so recognized in the world that people will recognize the truth. Mashiach will lead us to that truth, to lead the world to the truth, and therefore there'll be no more fighting, no more wars. But I think there's another angle here. There's an angle here of a person who's going to be able to bring people together. It's not just going to be, the way I understand, not just going to be, he's going to show everybody the greatness of God, everybody recognize God, and everything just melts away. There's going to be another element there. There's going to be an element of someone who could bring people together. People will realize through him, through his love, that we need to all come together. The recognition of God will be the means by which people will be able to do that, but they're going to need someone to bring them together, to break down the barriers between people. Just as Ruth did with her kindness. She brought down the barriers. Mashiach will bring down the barriers between people. And that's why Ruth was the matriarch, became the matriarch of Mashiach. She brought the people together through her kindness. And Mashiach is going to bring all peoples together through his love, through his strength of character. It was all a result of Ruth. All a result of nothing flamboyant, nothing too glitzy, but rather through simple, sincere kindness. That's how she did it. That's how she brought the Jewish people together. And it was in that merit that she will be the one that from her will descend Mashiach, who will again follow in those footsteps of breaking down the barriers between people and bringing everyone together in the service of Hashem. Thank you for listening. This has been a little bit of light. Wishing you a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful Shavuos.